Bricks. Bricks. Bricks! There are so many bricks in St. Louis. Why is that? Well, before these bricks came along here, this city right here on Laclede's Landing was predominantly made of wood. But all of that changed in May of 1849. On May 17th at 9 p.m., a fire alarm sounded. The steamboat called the White Cloud, lying at the foot of Cherry Street, was on fire. The White Cloud was one of hundreds of riverboats lining the Mississippi River landing. It was said that the riverfront was so packed with boats that a person could walk the entire mile-long length of the bank without setting foot on land, simply crossing from gangplank to gangplank. In 1849, St. Louis was a hustling, rowdy city, trying to establish itself as a hub of commerce for a young and growing country. The 49ers, flushed with gold fever, would treat this city as a last stop before the vast tracts of the prairie. St. Louis had just begun recovering from a devastating cholera epidemic that had ripped through its crowded tenements and had decimated the population. A note on steamboat construction. Steamboats were powered, by steam. This steam was created in metal boilers by men loading wood around the boiler, setting it ablaze, and thus creating steam. Often the wood was stored too close to the boiler and it would catch fire. These metal boilers were built quickly and not often uniformly, held together with straps of iron and rivets, and were prone to explode. When the bell rang at 9 p.m. on that fateful May evening, the watchmen thought they had put out the flames. By midnight, however, flames had engulfed the upper decks of the White Cloud, and what happened next would be debated to this day. Normally, in a case where a steamboat catches fire, the tactic for containment is to cut loose the neighboring steamboats to contain the fire and prevent it from jumping to nearby boats. In fact, just weeks prior, the steamboat Highland Mary had threatened to burn its neighbor, the Edward Bates, and the flames were contained using this exact tactic. But in this case, they cut the neighboring boat too late, which happened to be the very same steamboat Bates, or they failed to cut the mooring and the Edward Bates caught fire. What we do know is the Bates, once loose, became what was essentially a fire ship, swept downriver, crashing violently into the Belle Island and the Julia, spilling cinders and burning coals onto their decks and igniting them instantly. Hemp bales, lumber, and greasy pork on the levee acted like kindling, helping the fire leap to the city's warehouses. The fire was no longer just a threat to those making their living solely from the river. It was a threat to the entire city. 1849 St. Louis, just like much of the country, did not have municipal fire stations. Instead, several private fire companies made their living competing against each other to get to the fire first. At this point, with the threat growing, private fire companies dropped all pretense of competition and began cooperating together. Soon, 3 blocks of warehouses were burning and at least 1,000 men were battling the inferno, while store owners and other people whose lives and livelihoods were being threatened clogged the streets with carts full of possessions. As the night wore on, things got even worse. With the high demand being placed on the city's infrastructure, the water system gave out. Hoses attached to fire engines ran dry almost immediately. The fire at this point was described as an uncontrollable blaze, and without water, drastic measures had to be taken. Enter Captain Targee. In his day job, he served as a minor city official, but this terrible night, he stepped forward as a leader with an audacious plan. He argued that a firewall was necessary, and to do that, they would need to bring down buildings in the path of the fire. Targee and members of the Missouri Fire Company began collecting the gunpowder from the nearby arsenal. The men would carry these barrels in their arms through the firestorm, hoping they would not catch fire and explode. Targee chose a line of 6 structures on the north side of Market Street to make his stand.
As he was setting the charges for the final structure, a music store owned by John Phillips, a barrel of gunpowder that Targee was holding exploded, killing the father of 6 instantly.
Targee's sacrifice was not in vain, however, as the firewall saved the city. The inferno broke against Targee's wall.
Firefighter John Lee Roy Carver of the Mound City Company Firemen said of that day that he was less stricken by the damage caused by the fire than by its many victims. Men, women, and children left destitute, wrapped in little more than rags and blankets, having fled the fire in the middle of the night, sat on the sides of the smoking streets, hungry and thirsty, trying to comprehend the devastation wrought by the mighty hand of the fire on their city. In the end, at least 4 people died. 430 buildings were destroyed. 280 businesses and more than 2/3 of the city's wholesale dry goods burned. The devastation was complete, with homes, businesses, and lives lost to the inferno. But it was the response to the tragedy that defined the city we know today. Before the fire, most of St. Louis's buildings were made of wood. The fire changed everything. With the city's rich clay deposits, brick became the material of choice for rebuilding, leading to the beautiful brick cityscape we see today.
It wasn't just the building materials that changed. The fire gave rise to a complete overhaul of the city's building codes. In addition to changing the building codes, St. Louis also started a municipal fire department.
The phoenix that rose from the ashes of 1849 is the St. Louis we see today. A city forged and refined by its history, standing tall and proud, thanks to the tenacity of her people.
Hey, if this episode resonated with you, like it, subscribe to our channel, and comment about things that we can cover in the future. Thank you.